The 10th Africa Unity for Renaissance conference successfully concluded this week after a 6-year break. The event, hosted by the Human Sciences Research Council in Johannesburg, is seen as a critical platform for reimagining Africa's development through a digital lens. It brings together scholars, policymakers and industry leaders to discuss how emerging technologies can bypass traditional economic growth stages. Let's talk more about this with University of Johannesburg School of Economics, Dr. Miriam Altman. Doctor, we hear the term digital transformation everywhere lately. For the average person on the street, what does this actually mean?
Well, it should mean more than it probably does. It's absolutely critical that everybody really becomes a digital native, is online, using digital technology, is using services in the cloud. In countries like Malaysia, China, Vietnam, and so on, it's absolutely widespread. Unfortunately, across Africa, it's not the same, and it's going to leave the population behind.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that public trust in government systems is very low. Can AI help make things like these, such as police visibility or the courts, a little fairer or effective?
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt that it would make an enormous difference to the quality of services. In Africa, Rwanda has really leapfrogged that. And, as you might know, that's a low-income country, but they've committed very deeply to digital services by government, even where people aren't that connected, using older technology, 2G phones, that kind of thing. There's always ways around it, but given the long distances that people have to travel to get services, given the need to be distributing grants, finance, drugs, all kinds of things, there's no question that digital services would be an enormous game changer, also in terms of improving accountability, which is kind of what you were referring to.
I often wonder what puts Africa in a unique position where AI is concerned. I mean, what can Africans do with AI that the rest of the world isn't doing?
Well, I'm not sure that I would pose the question that way, if I understand your question. The problem is that Africa's behind. We have maybe 1% of a data center capacity globally. Our skill sets aren't where they need to be. Our regulatory capabilities aren't where they need to be. The digital capabilities of the population is not what it needs to be. And that's not because countries are poor. And that's why I was referring to countries like Vietnam that, have risen quite fast, but even when they were poor, invested heavily in population development and digital capability. So the contribution that digital capability and AI could make to areas like agriculture, infrastructure, government services, finance, you name it, is incredible. Africa falls behind, and therefore the populations are going to fall behind because very little is going to be available on paper. If people aren't, number one, online and using services in the cloud, then they're just not going to get information. They're not going to be really anywhere. Then you've got all the productivity improvements that can happen from the kinds of optimization that AI can provide. Now, South Africa is ahead of the rest of the continent, not surprising. Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt are coming behind. Almost all of AI startup funds are in these 4 countries. We're going to have to move ahead. Just to make the point, though, where Africa could benefit more than probably other places is because populations are urbanizing, but they're still less dense. So when you've got great geographic distance, as we do in South Africa, for example, digital services can be game changers in relation to improving accessibility for populations that are fairly marginalized.
I mean, you make an example of the likes of Vietnam. Doctor, what does this signal about the African continent? Is it just that leaders do not understand the benefits of AI development in that sector? Is there just no political will?
Answer is yes. There's an AI strategy. The AFTB have recently said that they're going to commit I think $16 billion to $10 billion to an AI plan, which, overall isn't much, but at least it gets us going. Yeah, there isn't sufficient commitment. The reason that, they're words, but the reason that Vietnam as a poor country, which is what it was able to get ubiquitous digital capability and have a population that is digitally capable. And I just refer to them because they were a very poor country and still did something about it. China's the same, even when it was poorer, you had it across the country. And we just aren't committing in the same way to the kind of infrastructure and skills levels and investments that are required to really make a meal of this, which is what we have to do. It's a fundamental cultural, it really is like an industrial revolution.
I mean, I suppose then it really does make it difficult when governments are not championing the use of AI or even educating their constituents about the importance of it, right? It further fuels people's perceptions that AI will take their jobs, for instance. So how do we teach workers to use AI as a helper rather than seeing it as a threat?
Well, it can be a threat if the population doesn't upgrade. And at the most fundamental, I hate to say it, but kids not being able to read for meaning is a starting point. It raises the cost of everything down the road, but certainly you're not going to be digitally engaged if you can't read for meaning, you know? So, the starting point is to do something about basic education, basic health, basic nutrition. It always comes down to the human capability. I'm often talking about that, but this isn't a highfalutin thing. So at the get-go, we've got to be lifting up the basic capabilities of the population. And in so doing, making sure that kids aren't scrambling for data. So I mentor young people and even kids that are on their, from poor communities that are on their way to engineering degrees. I wouldn't call them digital natives. They don't really get the cloud. They don't really get what big data is because they're not digital natives. They're constantly scrambling for data. Now, again, coming back to Vietnam, when you're in a country like that, everybody has data. It's extremely cheap. Everybody's got access to that, et cetera. So, these are the kinds of basic things that have to be done. Now, there's bigger issues as well, of course, around, data center investment. You need energy to drive data centers. You need regulation to protect populations against, for cybersecurity. There's a whole lot of other things that have to happen, but at the outset, we need a population that is digitally engaged. Nothing replaces that need.
That is University of Johannesburg School of Economics, Dr. Miriam. Doctor, thank you very much for your time.